everyone, it's Angela Stevens with the podcast Refocus with Angela. And I have got an extraordinary guest today with me today, and he is going to give us such insight on the education market and students. And I've got so many questions for him. So here we go. But Jon Bergmann, I'm going to let you tell us more about yourself because you should see his background. It's so impressive. He has done so much. But I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about what he does. So, Jon, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great you're going to show Angela. Yeah, my story, I've had a weird story. I started teaching in 1986. I'm old. So I'm a teacher, right? I taught for 24 years in Colorado. And at year 19, myself and a colleague, Aaron Sams, we created or pioneered a model of teaching called flip learning that we had no idea eventually led us to write a book that came out in 2012 that became an international bestseller, translated into 13 languages. I want to say 500,000 copies just of that book. That led to 11 more books. Who would have thought that I would become an author? For a season, then I was director of technology for 2 years actually, in a school district in the Chicago metropolitan area. So moved from Colorado to Chicago, and then that's when the book came out. And then I traveled around the world, had a chance to go to virtually every continent you can think of except Antarctica, and spoke to thousands and thousands at one time, 25,000 people at one time, and shared this idea of flipped learning with teachers all over the world. Did that for 7 years. And then I felt the pull to do what I was made to be. And I came back to the classroom. Not many people do what I do, is that you become sort of a weird educational celebrity, and then you decide to just go back and be a teacher. And so I went back to classroom. I'm now standing in my classroom. I have students arriving tomorrow morning for my 39th year in education. And I'm so excited to greet these kids. I had some just come visit me 10 minutes ago or so, and I got to meet some new students. It was awesome. And
Wow.
in the process of coming back to the classroom, I wrote another book, the Mastery Learning Handbook, that I think is, honestly, I feel like my publisher even said, this is your best work. It really is what I really believe about what education should be and how we could transform schools and make them awesome.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's why I let him explain that because it is so impressive. And, I love it when I meet people who love what they do. And obviously, this is something that you were born to do because it brought you back to the classroom. And that's so interesting. And I want to ask you that question first. So, what is it about teaching that you love so much?
Angela, I get the privilege of, I know some of you are going to go, I can't believe you can say this, hanging out with teenagers for my life. They have energy, they have passion, they have drama, but I get to make a difference. I don't know. I have seen lives change just by being around these young people and having an opportunity. I know I'm only a small part to some degree of their lives. I see them for an hour a day or whatever, for 9 months, but they become a part of your heart. I don't know. It's what I was made to do, I guess.
I love that. So I got a quick question, and I want to get into your background, but I want to ask you a little bit about the students. So you've been teaching for a long time. So what I know that students have struggled in the past, but what are they struggling with today?
Well, one thing I have noticed in the last, I would say, 5 years. I mean, this will be my sixth year back after I took the sort of travel the world game. Um, Students have higher anxiety than they've ever had before. I've never seen more students have to go to institutions, mental type situations. Uh, I know that COVID is really the pandemic learning did not work well for most students, and it's been very
Right.
difficult for them. And so, and our students have paid the price, so there is some sadness. But on the positive side, I see great potential and optimism and resilience from these students. And so I am not a negative person about where our students are today. I'm very optimistic for our society. That doesn't mean there aren't bigger hurdles for them to overcome, though. I mean, I think there are. And so that's something. And then you add to that just the distractions of their phones and having to learn to put them down. These are kinds of things that we, as the adults in the room, need to help our students with. So.
Absolutely. That's an ongoing issue in many grades. And so I appreciate that. And I understand that because, our podcast is centered around ADHD and focusing, but it doesn't matter whether they've got ADHD or not. A lot of them may have anxiety. A lot of them may be going through depression or issues at home that you don't know, right? You don't know. And it's getting those students to talk. And you seem like one of those teachers that they could come and talk to at any time. And I commend you for that because I think teachers are so important. I'll just share with you really quick one story that I had lost my sister when I was 16 and she was 10 years old. And I remember a teacher, it was in my first hour, and I think I had tears coming down my eyes. And she literally came over, handed me a piece of paper, and said, "Can you take care of this?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Walk that down to the office or something." And it just was a note that said, "This is for you anytime you need to take a break." I will never forget that. So what I think you do is amazing. And so about you, let's move on. But I love hearing about how students are doing today because you have real time with them. We can sit back and say, this is what they're struggling with, but you're with them every day, every single day. You see it. And so I think that's really great. Actually, I do have one last question about that. What can parents do to support their children that maybe you don't see as much? Is there anything that parents can do to help either with grades or with anxiety at home? And I love this opportunity to ask you this question because I think a lot of parents would like to know.
I'll try and be gentle, parents.
Yeah.
Let them be kids. I think our kids are overprogrammed, and I think that parents are contributing to the anxiety of their students. Too often, we've got the helicopter parents who think the kids have got to be in the competitive this and then the travel team that. And I would say a unstructured time where they can play. When I grew up, I'm old, right? My parents just said, make sure you're back by 9. And we would go out and hang out with the neighborhood friends and have fun. Now, I get that maybe not every place in America is safe, but I think sometimes I think the media feeds us that everything's unsafe in the world, and it's not that way every place. So let them be kids and don't overprogram them. And honestly, I think cognitively, and I'll be a brain scientist. I'm not really a scientist, but I've done a lot of reading on brain and education. Is that's part of just the development. Kids learn through play, and we don't let them play. We're giving a big disservice. So.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Thank you for that. Because I couldn't agree more. I remember when my son got his license, he said, "Okay, I'll see you back at 10 o'clock." And that was at 7 in the morning. And I was like, no, 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 that doesn't work that way. But tell us, okay, so first of all, you have been on TED Talks, you have written so many books. And like I said, his latest book is the Mastery Learning Handbook. Can they buy that on Amazon or where can they buy that?
Amazon, you bet.
Okay, perfect. So tell us about your flip method and your flip learning, because I'm so fascinated about, that model and how that works. So for anyone that doesn't know you, can you kind of explain that to us?
So I'll just tell you the story of how it got started. So Aaron Sams and I were teaching at rural Woodland Park High School in Woodland Park, Colorado. And we had a problem. A lot of our students, because of your rural school, if a kid's on the basketball team or the debate team or something like that, if they're going to go catch a competition, they would have to hop a bus around noon. I mean, the closest high school was 45 minutes, but some were 3.5 hour
Right.
drives.
Right.
So they're leaving. And so what we were having is a bunch of kids who missed the afternoon classes. And then we taught chemistry and kind of a hard subject for high school kids. And we would have to be working after school, tutoring them and recatching them up. And Aaron walked in one day and said, "Hey, I found this software that could record our lectures and what we're writing." You had like a digital writing tool. And I said, "Oh, we should try that." So we went to the head of the science department and we asked if we could have $50 for this software. He said, "Sure." And then we started making videos of our morning classes for the afternoon classes. And then one day, the assistant superintendent, the curriculum director gal, she shows up and she says, "I love that you're recording your lectures." And she said this is kind of what sort of changed our world. She says, "My daughter's attending a local university and her professor's also recording his lectures. But she loves it because," and this is the words that confused us, but then changed everything. She says, she loves it because she doesn't have to go to class anymore. And then later that afternoon, or maybe lunchtime, whatever, Aaron and I were just jawing about that. And we said, kind of weird, wasn't it? Yeah. And basically, we said, well, wait a second. What's the value of class time if you don't have to go to class? Now, this is now 2006. Let's go back. This is before YouTube, or maybe YouTube was just getting born. I mean, there's all this stuff. And so we said, well, what if we like pre-recorded our lessons and we had that as their homework? And when they come to class, they'll do the homework in class and the classwork at home. And we said, oh, yeah, we ought to do that. And that was how the flip was born. And that one conversation, we saw one standard deviation improvement in our students' scores. And we did this at a school where 30% of the kids didn't have the internet at home. We figured out we had to get creative on getting access to students. And then we realized we'd stumbled on something that could change the world. We weren't sure it really was, but we said, this is kind of a big idea, we think. We had no idea that it would turn into a book and an idea and a worldwide movement where, I mean, it's weird. I've spoken at Harvard University, me, right? And
your teachers would be so proud of you.
Harvard Medical School has flipped, and I've been to Harvard Medical School and talked with their professors. Yeah, who would have thought, right? I mean, now, as a note, we weren't completely some people say, well, I invent the flipped classroom. That was our origin story. There was a professor in 1999 who called it something different with videotapes. That must have been very difficult. So we like to call ourselves pioneers of the model. We were the first ones who popularized it. So to say I invented it, we thought we did, I guess, but it was the idea. We were the right people with the right idea at the right time, where the internet was exploding with video tech at that point. So,
right. And there's so many creative ways, right? If we just think about how we can help our kids, right? So, how many schools now are using this model? Do you know?
No idea. I mean, I doubt that you could find a school in the world who hasn't experimented at least with the model. I mean, it's not like a school adopts the model. Typically, what you find is there's 3 or 4 teachers. At my school that I'm at now, I bet we've got 50 teachers probably in the school ballpark. 15 of us are flipping, but probably that's a little higher because I'm here to help them. So, that kind of a thing. So it depends on. But yet there's also a school district, not a school district, it's a state or a province in Argentina. I helped them start this project when I was on my 7-year thing. And wow. They have decided to flip the entire province of Misiones, Argentina. I believe there's 300,000 students in the entire province, like a state in the US. And they started that about 2 years before COVID and kind of had a 6-year plan. And it accelerated in COVID, obviously. And so now everyone's asking, how did Misiones do? It's a poor rural part of Argentina, and they did it. So you can do it at large scale like that, or you can have one teacher who flips a class. Or I worked with a school last week. I've got a school client that I still do some consulting with in New Mexico. And my task for these teachers that I work with, these 25 teachers or so, was between now and end of September, I want you to flip 2 lessons. And we're going to slowly bring the process into their practice. So.
Wow. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. So let's say we've got a teacher or a principal listening to this podcast right now, and they want to do this. But what do they do? They have a teacher that will record their afternoon classes, or walk us through that so that they can understand.
We don't recommend you record an afternoon class. What you do is you pre-record a video. So I teach physics and chemistry and geology, and I have pre-recorded short 5 to 7 minute videos of every topic needed in chemistry or physics. I also have text that I will also assign. So you don't always flip with video. You can also flip with text, and some would even do a podcast, etc. So they're going to do a pre-learning activity ahead of time, which I'll use big fancy terms. It decreases the cognitive load. So there's this whole theory in the world of education called cognitive load theory. And if you give somebody too much, we call it drinking from a fire hose. You get too much and you're overwhelmed. Your cognitive load is overwhelmed, and you're done. You can't learn anymore. What the research is showing about flipped learning is that by them watching a video the night before, 7 minutes, they get introduced to it. They've now got some background, and when they come in class, they're going to do the chemistry problems. They're going to have the debate if it's an English classroom. They're going to practice speaking Spanish if they're learning a world language. They're going to physically do certain things in a weight room. I mean, this is applying also to, not just the more academic subjects, but in fact, Misiones Argentina, they did it. They piloted this. Their first group was their vocational high schools. And so they were pioneering this with auto mechanics and agriculture, like farming type techniques. And so it's not just sort of math and sciencey or history type things. It can also be any kind of learning, right?
Interesting. And it's so great and yet so simple, right? To adopt that idea of doing something different, right? And teaching something different. And that's so interesting. And there's well, I've got many questions for you, but when you were saying that you teach physics and geometry, I think in some other classes,
Geology, not geometry, but
oh,
yeah.
geology. Okay. So with my son, all right, so I said geometry because he struggled with that, right? But let's say physics, let's say something really tough. You can have, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. You can have a really intelligent student and they're making straight A's, but let's say they take one of your classes and they are just struggling. It happens, right? So, what is the best way that that student or parents or teachers can really bring that home? And the flip method is great, but let's say that just that one subject they're just struggling in. What is that breakthrough idea to get to them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, when a student's struggling, they need help. So I guess the benefit, I mean, 100% the benefit of a flipped or a mastery model is I have so much more time to help kids. Since I'm not yakking in front of the room, those minutes are now gone from me using that class time. So I'm walking around helping kids. And so I can identify, and I know which kids very quickly are going to struggle. I mean, I still have students who struggle, and I can then give them that individual attention. And sometimes the attention is they need to be more focused. I mean, students struggle in my class for two reasons. Number one, they're struggling because they're struggling with the content, and sometimes they need some additional motivation, shall we say. Not all kids, love my class. That's okay. And so I have to find ways to reach them. Sometimes I compare myself to a physical trainer. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit, in their face, as
Yeah.
a physical trainer guy. So.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, we talked about processing disorders, and a lot of kids have processing disorders, and there's different types, right? There's audio processing, different way, things like that. But how can you tell if your child has that, and how can you help that if you know your child has that?
Well, clearly, I mean, it depends on the school system you're in, but there are, professionals. We've got, special education professionals who come alongside me and help me with students who have processing, and then they give them additional tools to help them with their processing. I mean, I not to just sell the flipped and mastery model, but the beauty of this is that not all students learn at the same pace, right? In fact, in a mastery model, the idea is that student gets to the end of a unit, a chapter, whatever teacher wants to call their section of learning, and my students take a test. If they pass the test, they move on. If they don't, they don't. Which sounds, most teachers listening are going to say, how do you logistically handle that? And the answer is, read my book. I explain how I do this. I will do this tomorrow morning. Okay, so it works. But I believe what our education system is saying. It says, this is what I think it says. It's not a true statement. This is not a true statement I'm about to say. It says that if you learn fast, you're smart. If you learn slow, you're dumb. That is not a true statement, but that is what our educational system is saying, the way we have it set up in a
Yeah.
more traditional manner. But in my class, every student can get an A, if you want to call it, whatever, if they work through the content at their pace, not completely their pace. By the way, I like to say in the book, I talk about this, they get a flexible pace. Because if you say they can work at their own pace, there are some students, I don't know, maybe your sons or daughters, who will have no pace. So I have to give them a pace. But my students have done very well. It's been very well received by our families. It's working. there's research. There's and another name, by the way, of mastery-based learning, if you're interested, is called competency-based learning, really the same thing. And so you could look this up. There are now whole systems and organizations that are dedicated to making this happen on a larger scale.
That's interesting. And the other thing I was just thinking about was with your flip method, there's something about watching something or listening to something. And if you need to, you can watch it again or you can listen to it again, right? Where if you're in a classroom, you don't have that opportunity, right? And so definitely there, cognitively, there's something about that, about listening to it again, seeing it right in real time and at your time as a student, so that's so interesting. If somebody wants to adopt this model at their school and they don't, let's say they none of their teachers have heard about it. Hopefully they have, but if they haven't, will the book explain it? Can they reach out to you? What's the best way to go about this?
If you're interested in the flipped model, I would get our first book, Flip Your Classroom. We just came out with the second edition this last summer, completely updated, 40% new content. So I would encourage you to pick up that book. That was that first book, that 13 languages all over the world. If you're more interested in the mastery model, the Mastery Learning Handbook would be your best choice. Also, just reach out to me at jonbergmann.com and I can connect you with some online courses, things like that, that might be useful for you. Or like I said, like I work with this school district in New Mexico, I work with schools and I've got an organization that can help out, where you take the online course, get some coaching, et cetera, et cetera. And that'd be, if you've got a large group of teachers, that'd be for a principal or superintendent or something.
I love your energy. Now, regarding the school system, this is something I'm curious about, and I think many others are as well. If you want to create some type of change in a school system, and whether it be your idea or something else, what is the proper way to go about that? Is that to talk with the principals, the superintendents, get a group of teachers together? What's the way to make change?
Yes. It's a good question. I mean, you need both top-down change and you need it to come from the bottom up too.
Mhm.
I think what's happened in many, many school districts is some superintendent gets a great idea and then they don't get the buy-in from the teachers. And so, for example, I've just partnered with an organization called cbeignite.org. It's
Mhm.
competency-based education, another name for mastery. And it's run by a superintendent, Richard De Lorenzo. And he's brought me on board to reach the teachers. So we want to be able to reach teachers and the leadership at the same time, because what's been missing in education, I think, has been this sort of grassroots bottom up. And what flipped has been is it's been totally, I mean, it started in Little Woodland Park High School, Colorado, with Aaron and I, at least in its present iterations, and then it grew from there. But it was teachers who caught the ideas. It was shared on social media, and other teachers said, I got to try that, I got to try that. And then it exploded around the world after the book was published. So it really was a teacher up movement, but I think it's also been slowed down because it hasn't always gotten the leadership buy-in. And then sometimes you get the leadership buy-in and they haven't brought their teachers sufficiently along. I work with a school, one of the greatest schools I've ever been to is a school in, it's Ashurst Primary School in Ashurst, New Zealand. And their principal brought me in, and this is how he introduced me. And so he came to a conference I spoke at in Australia, and he said, I want to bring this to my school. I am so sold on this. But when I introduce you to my staff, when you come and visit me, I'm going to just, he said, I was at this conference and I heard this guy. I'm not sure this is the best idea for us, but this is the guy who helped really get us started. Can you listen to him? I mean, he was 100% sold out, but he wanted them to buy in.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
now it's one of the greatest schools in all of New Zealand. They're doing amazing things. They've moved not just to flip learning, but they have a mastery learning school. And it was the teachers bought in. And then, of course, they had the support of Heath. Heath is the principal. And they've just transformed that school. But if you just have, top down, it doesn't work. And the teachers, I've also talked to teachers who are so frustrated because their leadership has not been supportive of it. And usually what happens is that teacher goes to another school and they find a much better place because, yeah. So
Yeah, definitely. And again, we're light on teachers, right? There's a lot of gaps of really great teachers. If there's somebody listening who is thinking about being a teacher or wants to be a teacher, what's the best thing about or that you could say to them, or the best thing you do about teaching? And I know you get to hang out with kids, but if you were going to encourage them, what would you say to them?
Do you want to make a difference? I mean, you just have no idea the impact that you'll have in the lives of people. I have friends who, I live in Houston, Texas, and I love my friends, right? But they work in the oil industry and they sell widgets. Let's be honest, that's what they sell. They sell things that go in the oil and gas field. And I want to be able to put gas in my car, and so this is an important profession. So don't hear me, but oftentimes I hear them kind of longing for some kind of a meaningful thing that's deeper than selling things.
So true.
And uh and they'll volunteer at their church and they'll do these kinds of things, and that's good, and that's wonderful that they do that. So, but you get the impact the next generation, and I don't know, it's kept me, I mean, the energy. I mean, I'm one of the oldest teachers at our school now at 60 years old.
He
And
keeps saying old. Have you guys noticed this? And I'm 56, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm in that bracket now. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I could be these kids' granddad now at this stage.
Right.
So it's just fine. I can be the grandfatherly guy. So, but you can change lives. I don't know. There's nothing more meaningful, I think, than doing that, right?
That is honestly, that is so great. And many of my friends are teachers. And so that's why I love what you do. And I'm so inspired. And I could talk to you forever. And the time I do want to ask you, you've written a lot of books, right? And I know you hear about writer's block, right? Or people not being able to finish that book or getting started. And I don't want to leave this interview without asking you that question. How do you stay focused when you're writing, or if you're not, if let's say you're stuck and you can't get, through the book, what do you do?
I love to move my body. And so when I'm stuck, I will go on a long bike ride or a run. I used to do triathlons. And so I would argue that my best ideas always came on a long bike ride or a long run. And then it's like, boom, I'll stop in the middle of a run or a bike, and I'll talk to my phone, dictate to my phone. And now I've got this idea and it's offloaded. And now I can go back when I get back to my writing space. So, and that's how I guess I get unstuck, because I just need to get out and move.
I love that. And then I'm just curious, do you start with an outline, or do you, I mean, because I know there's a ton of people that want to be writers, but they're not. And so, I always say take a class. My mother's always said that to me, no matter how old you are. But if they're trying to write a book, is it a good idea to continue, get a ghostwriter, get an outline? What would you say to people like that?
I'm a big believer. Yeah, I have an outline and then I just start writing. But then I had a schedule. So like this last book, I needed to get it, I had a deadline, and I had to get it done through a summer. I sat down and looked at my summer. I'm a teacher, so I didn't have to work in the summers. And I said, how many weeks do I have? And we're going to go away for these 2 weeks. All right, I've got 8 weeks to get this done. All right, when can I do this? And so I would leave. I'm a very, very early bird. I would be swimming at 5:30 in the morning with my swim guys. And then right after swimming, I would grab a little breakfast at the Starbucks, and I would stay there for 3.5 hours every day,
Love
5 days a
that.
week.
Hmm.
And, just me and my laptop, and I'd have the internet to do research, but all my notifications are turned off. I'm focused. I've got a calendar of what I need to get done. And in the middle of this, I might be emailing my editor because she knows this is my writing time. And I'll say, because like when I started with this last book, I had 8 chapters. When I worked with my editor, it turned into 17 chapters. Now, it really wasn't like it was more content. We just divided it into smaller chunks. And yeah. And then you have to be willing. I think it's almost hilarious. She said, I sent her my final draft, and she said, and I like this. And she said, and I said, it's chapter 16, right? She says, yeah. I said, it needs to go, doesn't it? She says, yeah. I'd spent 3 days, probably, 15 hours on that chapter, and I knew it wasn't awesome. And she acknowledged it. And so we tossed it. I mean, you have to have sort of a humility to say, that paragraph I just wrote was junk. It's time to just, an hour on it. It's time to throw it away. But the next
Exactly.
time you do it, it'll be better, or that chapter or whatever. You've just got to have that humility to say, yeah, it was my first attempt and it wasn't awesome. So
I love that. Thank you for that. Because there's a lot of people that I hear say, "Oh, I want to write a book. I want to do this." And I always say, just do it. Just start, right? Just start something. And so I think that's great advice. So I could talk to you forever, but I have one last question. So I always ask this question at the end of our podcast. And, we're all not perfect, right? We're all not focused all the time. You've got to have those days. Maybe you could be the exception. I don't know. But you got to have those days that you're not focused, right? And on those days, when you get in your car and you're going, let's say to do a presentation, a talk, or to a class that really you've got to have game on. What
Yeah.
is the song or the genre or the artist that you listen to that gives you game on?
So there's a Pandora, what do you call it, channel that
Yeah,
it's called Blessing. So I'm a man of faith, and there's this song called Blessing. It talks about who you are, and it reminds me who I am in the Lord. And so that song has just been so meaningful, and I'll just crank that if I can. I'll put my headphones on, go for a walk. I need to just hear that song. It's called Blessing. So
I love that. And I listen to Pandora and I have not heard that one. So I will definitely need to check that out. I was just saying this. I just had one last question. We have people that will write into us and ask questions like for our guest. And I just thought of one that had come through. I wanted to ask you. She said that her daughter, when she takes tests, she's in high school, and she said when she hears the other pens going down or the pencils going down, and people are done with the test, it puts her in a almost fear of terror that she just feels like, oh, I've got to get done right now. And I was trying to answer her that question, and I said I would mention it, and you're the perfect person to ask. So for that student, any ideas?
good question. Tell her it doesn't matter. I mean, that what grade you get doesn't change your life. I mean, I don't know. In
I
my
had
class, that isn't the case because they take the test when they're ready, right? Because so when the kid has finished the level, then I call them levels, the unit, then they take it when they're ready. So they don't all take it at the same time. So there's no like stigma that, oh, everyone finished the test ahead of me or anything.
Right.
I don't know.
My advice to her
Wow.
was, headphones or like,
Oh,
earpods if they're allowed, to listen to music that keeps them calm, and then they don't hear that pencil going down.
that's true. That would work. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a thought. But well, Jon, I could talk to you, first of all day long. I'm so blessed that you were a part of this podcast today. I know you're going to inspire so many people, and you're going to inspire so many teachers to maybe make change and make change for their students, especially as the school year is right upon us. And I'm so grateful for teachers like you, because as I said before, the one teacher, I'm 56 years old, I'll never forget that moment. It was such a small thing, but teachers are so important, and the things that they do truly make a difference. And as you said, they do make a difference. So I graciously thank you for being on our podcast today.
And great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.